one is rules, cheats, and rebels. Tell us a rule, then show us somebody breaking it. Now we got your attention. Will they be punished or vindicated? What do Eve, Pandora, and Peter Rabbit have in common? They all been given rules and they all broke them. And that's where things get interesting. We all live by rules, so we pay very close attention to stories about anybody who breaks them.
3 ways to get more clients without being salesy: website, emails, and traffic.
What do you think is a rule? We go a little bit feminine, like the rule for women is to be really modest and not position themselves as experts, not draw attention, that kind of a thing. So it's social rule. So the first question on the other side is, who's the rule breaker in your story? It could be you, the innovator, or it could be your user, customer, or stakeholder. So in order to do well in business, I think it would be really fun to talk about these unwritten rules that we're not even aware of, because there was this hot discussion even last week in the Unhobbled group about that. In this case, set out all possible rules the hero of your story should break. Remember that most of the rules we live by are not written down, so that'd be kind of nice to pull all that out, go into 2 directions. In our case, it would be the hero is a rebel, acts selflessly and at cost to themselves, breaks societal rules in order to obey a higher rule. So in order to impact the horse world, you have to break those social rules. Rebels don't hide their actions. We're talking about promoting oneself, right? That's really like the art of self-promotion is very counter-feminine. There are books written about women not leaning into the conference table, but sitting in the second row, about women not taking up space and sort of making themselves big on the conference chair.
It's a really interesting conversation to have because we have a woman-dominated industry and there is still the glass ceiling, so to speak, of the men in the industry having a much easier time being successful, charging more.
There's also women clients.
Exactly.
And so this perceived understanding is that women don't speak up, don't take up a lot of space. And if they do, the end consumer may look at them as boasting, taking up, being too full of themselves versus
them being authoritative and being a leader.
So maybe what we could do is first list all the things in which we stand on our own way. And then also, could we do it in a way that it feels more feminine? Because we're not here to put the shoulder pads back on and suits and stuff like that. So we're not trying to emulate a masculine way of doing this, but can we make the hero somebody who reinvents the game based on the way they are with horses? That could be really fun. So let's first start maybe with what are all these unwritten rules?
Don't bother somebody.
Don't take time away from somebody who's like really busy. Why would they listen to you?
Don't draw attention to yourself. Don't take up space.
Don't have too strong an opinion.
What you have to say is not important.
Be kind. Kind means soft and gentle and accommodating. Be a good girl. And I bet you most of our very accomplished horse pros don't do that with horses, but they do it in society. How often do we hear, I don't like selling myself, I don't like marketing, not researching or not searching within themselves why they don't like that. Also, a lot of marketing and selling examples are male generated, and that often doesn't feel good to us. So there's a combination of us being conditioned to not speak up, not be assertive, not self-promote, don't push yourself to the front. But at the same time, that is also a very masculine approach of gaining advantages, which doesn't feel good to us. We are more collaborative. We are more herd animals. We're not the stallions in the herd constantly bickering and fighting for rankings. So what else hinders us? Like, we don't want what they do or how they do it. What else? Imposter syndrome, I think, is more prevalent among us.
I don't know that it's more prevalent, but we let it hold us back.
We listen to it more.
You know, whether they are external or internal, listen to them more.
Conflict. We don't want any conflict. We're very conflict avoidant. We really do this now as is stereotypical. Not everybody is. If pushed into the corner, we get into the FFF, fight, freeze, or flee. Many of us will flee. Many of us will freeze. Smaller percentage will fight. Criticism hurts. But if I don't really believe in myself in the first place, then the criticism hits twice.
It's also almost like that this good girl behavior, we internalize it so much that we even apply it to the way way we see ourselves. Like, we don't want to take up space within ourselves. There's this fear of being your own leader because you'll be perceived as pushy or rude or unkind or mean or
aggressive. But what we're lacking, some of our growing edges, is this very calm assertiveness. The thing we do quite well these days, I think, with horses, many of us. I think in the past that was still a bigger issue, and we were even there kind of being pushed around or swung from like doormat to aggressive.
And I would be willing to bet that every single one of our clients sees those behaviors in their clients with their horses.
Correct, especially the pushovers. And they themselves, being pros, have learned to stay very calm, have learned to manage that pressure and the emotion that comes up. They understand the more the horse escalates, calmer they become. That is a sign of a pro. It's a long shot to think that that ability can be used when promoting oneself in a way that they're just really standing deep into the ground, taking a stand, neither push nor being shoved. A keto approach of just being there.
I mean, and the way that shows up when they do it well is delivering value, being compassionate and respectful, being highly knowledgeable,
taking a stand, and whether that is the popular stand or not, when it's theirs, is sit through the fire if necessary.
And all of those things breed within their clients trust and respect. And even if somebody's not the right fit for them, or somebody that's a competitor is looking at them, it breeds respect.
Let's just say that awareness isn't there. Well, no wonder I shy away from taking a stand. It's taking the credit for the credit is due, and neither shying away from it, denying it, or minimizing the accomplishment, nor having a need to exaggerate it. It just is. This is what I have accomplished. I have worked with 500 horses. I have started 400 horses. I know how to start a horse. I'm neither the best horse starter nor, those were all really sweet little backyard ponies. It's just standing in it, and that seems to be a little difficult for some of us.
I was auditing one of our clients' clinics in my local area, and one of the auditors that was there, who was also working with horses professionally, had a really great question because she was feeling inauthentic in her work with horses because she had, started out in the hunter jumper world and then had moved to the natural horsemanship world and then had moved to R positive, and now was finding a new way of working with horses that was more hybridized and boundary plus positive reinforcement based. And her question was, how can I advertise my services when I have changed what I do so many times? And so what we pointed out to her was that she wasn't seeing the value in her own experiences and how her journey to where she was now was the exact same journey that her clients were taking. And because she had gone through it, she knew it deeper.
She could be that guide. Without the imposter syndrome, you have to be perfect in order to speak up. And stats show that. Like when promotions are offered, again, we generalize here, take the promotion and then figure out how to grow into the promotion. We, women, tend to want to be perfectly qualified for that promotion before we say yes. So that would be her have to be perfect as a horse trainer. I have to have this perfect linear climbing the career ladder as a horse professional in order to be able to advise somebody else. But that's very rarely really the piece. She just evolved through these different experiences. Like you said, mirroring the journey that many of her clients take. You and I, we've been through every discipline and every approach imaginable.
And it's that need to seem perfect is a really outdated way of thinking because it doesn't build trust. It builds that questionable authority. And today's consumer, it doesn't matter what they're looking for when they want guidance in something, especially something that's deeply emotional and personal as working with their horses. They want authenticity.
And they want this evolving person, this person who's open to new ideas, new input, like a lifelong learner, basically. Because like you said, with the parents, what we often see at our own parents is this rigidity. They stop learning, they stop being able to open their minds and hearts to new things. Right, follow the rules. So today it's no longer this this absolute authority. You gotta twirl the rope just like that, and you're gonna have to do just that or your horse won't respond, versus a more open adjustment to both horse and rider, their abilities, their age, their very unique combination that requires a much more flexible approach. So the question really is, when the rebel notices that in themselves, so they say, okay, yeah, I do this with horses quite well, but when it comes to promotion, that assertiveness thingy isn't mine. But they start to see, like, I would like to be able to speak about my work, to defend my work, to teach my work in a way that it feels really assertive. And that also counts for opening hours, payments, rescheduling, billing, leadership at the barn, all of those things, right? As a human, as a business person, what could they take from how they work with the horses so that in that moment they have that image in their head on how they would work the horse, and then just apply that to whether it's marketing or boundary setting or any of those things.
You know, back when I was running my training and teaching business, one of the things that I would tell my clients was that horses are no different than humans. The only difference is that humans ruminate on the past experiences and they vocalize things. And because of those two things, with their words, humans lash out, even if it's unwarranted. But just like a horse that lashes out, being fair and compassionate rather than reactive and aggressive, defensive, assertive, it can be a situation that can be soothed.
So the ability to de-escalate a stressful situation in horsemanship is one really great skill to de-escalate aroused nervous systems between humans. So that's a really good way.
But it's interesting because when a horse physically lashes out to defend themselves because they are triggered, it feels less threatening to us.
It does.
Than when somebody verbally lashes out. And I would argue that it is because we are afraid of being rejected by our own herd, like species herd, when we feel so accepted when a herd of horses, because we know how to navigate them. While the same skills that allow us to effectively navigate a horse herd will allow us to effectively navigate the human herd, the only difference is we're not afraid of being rejected by the horses.
Because I think a lot of people are actually afraid of being rejected by the horse, but we notice the lashing out not as a rejection, right? Immediate feedback that something just didn't work. So if we did that with humans, see it just as feedback, then we wouldn't be hurt and then we could respond. So that's in a conflict situation. And in marketing too, I think we don't assertively promote ourselves because we are afraid that that is looked at as an aggression and hence invites backlash. We don't want that.
Exactly.
So the approval of other humans.
It's a safe feeling. And if you can't get their approval, at least don't attract their disapproval.
Correct. Because it's better to be in the bottom of the herd than not in the herd at all. As long as we understand that it's a primal fear of being part of a protective herd that stops us from actually effectively, and again, promote us, not even express our authority, then it might be that we can separate a little bit more from that fear, because in reality, that's actually not true. It's a fear that very rarely so-and-so criticizes you, even on Facebook. You know, they might live 3,000 miles away. In reality, that person doesn't affect you at all. Your spouse, your family, your children, your dogs, you know, your farm, they don't reject you because you said something that pisses somebody off 3,000 miles away. And yet, that threat of disapproval, so I'm outside the herd, is a real primal limbic system response. So if we're not aware of it, we really stop self-promoting because of it.
Exactly. And it's so interesting as we're talking about this. One of the things that's coming to mind is that when that happens in a herd of horses, when a horse gets rejected, what do? They go off and they form a new herd. And that's essentially what we advocate our clients do, is that they build a herd, a community around themselves of like-minded people by being the leader of that herd.
Right. But that means that you actually step up and step into your power, and you don't, like one of the rebels, don't hide their actions. You can't hide. You have to actually say what you mean, do what you say consistently, and raise your awareness that you hesitate taking that action because of some primal need to be accepted that may actually not be that relevant to your life.
And that feeds directly into the 3 ways we teach people to get more clients without without being salesy. Through effective communication with your website, through engagement with your audience, through emails, with engagement for potential clients, through your lead generation skills with organic social media.
I don't want to write emails. I don't want to bother people with more junk in their inbox. But when you write something that comes from that place of power and authority and humble service, it's not junk. It adds to their lives. Your email may be one of the only of the 100 that they get that day. They open and say, oh, hallelujah, I'm glad that just arrived in my inbox. It's also this understanding that you are not bothering. Your wisdom adds people's lives. The same on social media. It could feel like digital junk. Add more to whatever, Facebook or Instagram. But if it's worth paying attention to and you believe that is, then you're actually adding to people's lives.
And with social media, for so many people, it feels like attention-seeking behavior rather than what it should be, which is delivering value to people that would otherwise not have access to it.
Well, there's the difference between true power and false power. And the horses can read that like nobody's business, right? You can't pretend to set a boundary if in the back of your mind you're like, yeah, I'm not so sure about this boundary, but intention is way more important to the horse than major physical action. So an intention behind an email, an intention behind your website or a social media post matters actually more than the big words or the most amazing image. It might work on short term to have an amazing image, but do the right people click and like it? Or are you more interested in building your herd, your safe herd, not winning some popularity contest, but to actually from your true power from within to the out, are the leader where other people go, thank goodness this person exists. And that's what we see with the horses all the time. It's a very little gesture if your intention is absolutely pure and clean. Like gentling Mustangs, I think there's probably no better training territory because at first they're just so much more sensitive to intention. Yes, we have to dull them down a little in order to live within our system. But at first, their survival depended on intention reading. By the time your neighbor horse starts fleeing your food, right? It's the thought that neighbor horse has before it takes action that you need to pay attention to, which is why it looks like they fly at the same time. So the same way is our intention. If our website is just rah, 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 and I'm just going to go and stretch my self-promotion muscle, feel the authenticity, and it doesn't matter if that was a $25,000 site. But if it's really about, this is who I am, this is what I know, I worked hard to get to know this, I'm open to new learning, and you, reader, are the more important part of this whole thing, whether it's my social media post, my email, or my website, then you're not bothering. I have to think about this all the time because bother is one of my core wounds growing up in Germany. I remember my grandpa, I only hear one voice over and over and over, and that's the one that should never been heard. I didn't have a right to say anything as a little kid. Who was I guess? And I think a lot of women have issues with being a bother. So the opposite of being overly self-promoting, I have to say sometimes I fall into that temptation to be kind of like sneak my way into power. My husband called me out on this one. Do you really want this? So here's a really good example. It has nothing to do with horse. Is how do you feel about going to the supermarket with me? And he's like, you setting me up for failure with this point. Either I say, I don't feel like going to the supermarket, at which point you're going to withdraw and play the poor martyr that always has to go to the supermarket. Or I say, I feel like going to the supermarket, but I'm not sure that you feel like going to the supermarket. Because I feel like you're tying a hand behind my back. If I start saying something like this in the door frame of his office, he goes, what do you really want? I need to go to the supermarket and I would love you to come with me. He goes, okay. He puts everything away, puts his shoes on. So there's false power versus true power.
And that false power is really taking away the power, just like your husband's saying, of the other person.
And I think the horses, they feel so uncomfortable when you start to like, you want to come? Do you want to not come? And they're like, do you want me to come or not? You notice this when you like do liberty walking with you and you're in the arena and the horse is free and your intention is to actually walk and your intention is for the horse to walk with you. 99% of the time, the horse horse walks with you. You get sneaky around it and you try some little strategies and like, oh, I think if I turn at this angle, the instinct says, maybe if I have a carrot in my hand, they're going to follow me. That's sneaky. That's not true power. And it confuses them.
That actually reminds me of an experience that I had that I'd completely forgotten about. It's probably been 17 or so years since this happened. I was training a young mare for my mom, and a friend of mine brought some random cowboy from Nebraska, I think, out to work with her horses. She was boarding with us, and I think he had worked with Tom Dorrance and some of the like old great Western cowboys that were horsemanship based. And he had me with this young, super sensitive, super reactive chestnut mare that I was working with, actually had me long lining her at liberty, changing gaits, steering, changing directions, halting just through intention. And it was one of the most goosebump inducing experience to feel that level of connection and that level of power, because I had such clear intention in what I wanted. And my friend's friend that she also brought to work with this guy didn't have the same success. And he kept saying, you're not clear enough in your intention. And she just got mad because she's like, yes, I am. I know what I want the horse to do. And he's like, yeah, but you're not communicating it. And that's the thing, is it doesn't matter how much you want something to happen.
And contrary, more you want it to happen, more that's a repelling energy.
You just have to communicate.
That's a really, really good point. So when you write your emails, when you write your website, it's really about ideally just standing in your power, have the intentions of successfully communicate what you want to convey. And that's so hard, because otherwise it feels manipulative. If I'm now going to write a post and I'm going to use every technique out there in the world because I know that that's a trigger and then this is a trigger and then yada 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 yada, that's all nice and good and it might work for a couple times, but people know. A social media friend of mine, she promotes herself as a marketer, and every time I read it, I'm like, there's something not right.
And for us, with what we do, how often do we read something and go, yep, that's marketing lingo, bye.
Oh,
and then
God.
Every once in a while, we'll find something and go, I see the strategy behind this, but it's so good.
Correct.
The intention is so clear and so resonating.
And pure.
And pure, yes. I'll go through the whole process and I'll end up buying, even though I know
the strategy, and it's okay. It's not throwing out the baby with the bathwater. You should structure an email in a certain way or a website in a certain way, but it's the structure. You have to still fill it with heart and power and this just knowing that what you have to offer is of service to the world. At some point, I think I grew a little bit more as a person than as a marketer, and I would just randomly write. It worked, but it was much less effective than if I still use the structure that is proven, but fill it with words that actually have power. So it's like with horse training. We don't have to throw every technique out that we learn, or every principle, or every piece of learning theory that we learned. We're going to finish this with a really interesting last example. So we've been asked by our social media manager to create B-roll. So yesterday is a beautiful day here in Germany, and I take my Lusitano on a nice walk, and too late realized that grass everywhere. What's the harm? I'm just gonna go and take the halter off. It didn't take more than 20 seconds before he decided that the grass was way better. Over had his buddies, and he went straight home, and I walked home by myself chasing my horse. And at that point I realized how subtle the halter as a manipulative tool, because he never pulls on that rope. He sticks his head in it. Seems to be consensual that he puts a face in the halter. But the moment I removed it, his true intention was there. My Mustang mare would have never done that. We have 8 years together. My company gives her the safety that allows her to not run home to her buddies, right? I assumed that that's what we had, and it was very, very clear, thank goodness safe, there were no roads or anything like this, that we have not established that yet. I am not yet an authentic safety spot for him. It was a conditioned, manipulative tool that I used to keep them near. It was a really humbling experience.
And what powerful feedback.
I mean, I cried. I cried. Not because I knew it wasn't far and I heard him cry to the other horses, and it's all good. But I thought, oh, more work to be done. And some of it is over time, and this is how we're going to finish it. I can be as clear in my intentions as I want to, as good of a horse trainer as I aspire to be. Some of it is contact points. I just need time with the guy. Not riding time necessarily, that kind of a time where it starts to feel to him like I'm part of the herd and I'm a good alternative with much greener grass than is.
Making deposits into their emotional bank account to the point where you have a balance.
Yeah, it still makes
not
me
even
cry.
Making withdrawal.
I felt so bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, I felt so bad. Like, oh my God. And how subtle the manipulation, because there's never a pressure on that lead rope. He walks like the perfect gentleman next to me with the halter and lead rope. So I think that's something to aspire. That doesn't mean we also don't want to set the standard so high that we say when every email needs to be fully in your power and every social media post and your website, kind of setting ourselves up for failure. But it's to understand if we're actually using true power or fall into slight manipulation, which will be caught to some extent by your readers.
The thing is, just like with the horse, you just go back and start adding deposits back.
Of course, people are also very forgiving. It's like parenting, I guess. You hope that there's a red line that goes through the relationship, and sometimes you're on this side. A coach once said it's like sailing. You're never really on. And as you do it more and you rewrite your websites and you write more posts and you notice in yourself this desire to hide or this desire to manipulate or to just not step into who you are and can be, then I think that you can really speak up. You can really take credit for the things you have accomplished in life without sounding like you're the biggest shit around, basically. And that goes around is maybe a cure, or not a cure, an alternative to some of a more masculine way of promoting. Not that that's not authentic to the males, I'm not saying that, but it often isn't to us. And so for us to actually come from a place of humble service, and honestly, when a male does it, isn't it the most attractive thing around, right? So we do appreciate it, obviously, in both genders.